Okay, this morning, as Kim had asked, what's the difference between blaming someone and helping them see their blind spot? And that could take a day to unpack that one. It's a bit broad, if you will, because it can go so many different levels. I would first need to know the setting of what setting are we talking about. Is it me doing it from in front of the room or some speaker doing it from in front of the room? It might be just a little bit different there than if it's a coach working with a client over a call. That could be uniquely different. It might be a parent working with a child. It might be a child pointing out a blind spot of the parent. Every scenario that I pointed out would be a little bit differently addressed. It might be me working with somebody for the very first time, a brand new person, and I will hit it differently, pointing out their blind spot than I will the person that I've worked with for 5 years or 8 or 10 years or longer. So it's going to be, and then also it could be different with me working with somebody that I know their personality is in such a way that having a blind spot pointed out to them, they still haven't built the strength to not take it as a personal slam, but to rather recognize it as this guy is really trying to help me out. This is awesome. I'm so grateful to have a mentor in my life that will show me where I can make some adjustments. You know, all of that comes down to years of being willing to have our own blind spots pointed out. And that's tough because for me, I was one of those people that when a blind spot was pointed out, it meant that I was a lesser person. Are you guys understanding this? I know you can't answer. You're muted. But in your mind, I'm assuming that makes sense. Far too often we take blind spots pointed out as a personal attack, and it never is intended for that to be the case. Now, sometimes when a random person points out a blind spot, it is a personal attack. They do it because they're called the sniper. They're called a person that is taking shots at you just to make you look bad. They point out your blind spots to make you look bad. So again, let's come back now. I was pointing out different personalities, different people, different settings, where it all alters it a tiny bit, maybe. You know, I'll be considerate with who I'm talking to, the environment that I'm in, and what exactly the blind spot is. So those all play a role in how we point out someone's blind spot. So it's not as simple as a one-liner fixes all, but the one-liner that does fix it all is to do it with love and compassion. And if I do it with love and compassion, I'm considerate of the environment. I'm considerate of the basically where they're at in their personal growth journey. I'm considerate of how well I'm open to having my own blind spot pointed out. Because based on how I desire to have my own blind spot pointed out determines how I will go about pointing out your blind spot. It's kind of like the coach that does not like to be held accountable. That coach finds it hard to hold others accountable for the most part. They don't hold others accountable, and when they do, it's oftentimes more of a blaming way, because a coach that doesn't like to be held accountable doesn't want to hold others accountable because they don't want that coming back. So, but blind spots must be pointed out, because if we don't know about them, they'll kill us. If we don't know that there's a blind spot in our mirror on the vehicle that we're driving, we are not aware that there could be somebody sitting there in that blind spot. Especially truck drivers would understand what I just said. Even small cars can have blind spots in the mirror. And you go to turning, and all of a sudden you find yourself turning into someone, or all of a sudden you hear some horn blasting off. You wonder what's going on. You almost hit somebody. And that's sometimes what will happen is if we're not mindful of the environment and that there's somebody sitting there that's holding on to something, they've made something their identity, and we recognize it as a blind spot. We try to point out their blind spot, and all of a sudden their horn blasts off. And by that time, fists are almost flying. We realize that we have started to turn over onto someone, at least in their opinion. We're turning on them. We're about to crush them in their opinion. And it wasn't meant that way, potentially, by the person pointing out the blind spot, but maybe the person wasn't aware of the actual scenario. So Pointing out a blind spot. Let's come back. We talked about a lot of different scenarios that we get to be mindful of. And you're saying, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to remember all of those different scenarios? Well, just re-listen to the recording and take note of how many of those scenarios are applicable to you, whoever is listening to this. How many people in your life are your children, your parents, your mentors, the list goes on. You will receive your blind spots being pointed out differently from every person. And you will differently point out their blind spots. Sometimes when our blind spot has been pointed out, we tend to be a bit frustrated, and so we take that as a cue that we should be pointing out other people's blind spots as well. Hey, if I got one, then you need to get one too, right? That is another blind spot in and of itself. Although I might be pointing out a true blind spot, if I'm doing it to kind of avenge myself, it will never be received well. So we get to be always mindful of, why am I pointing out this blind spot? Number one, is it kind? Is it true? Is it helpful? And if it's a yes to all of those, please move forward and help that person with their blind spot. Help point it out. You know, the blind spots are something that we cannot avoid. And if we don't want to point it out, we will have a life of misery. It'll feel good to not have my blind spot pointed out for a day or two. But the results that I get for walking around with them will ultimately come back to haunt me. And they do. I have blind spots that I know I've hung on to. I get to overcome and continue growing in. And a year from now, I hope the same blind spots that affect me today aren't affecting me a year from now, but I've went deeper and I found some others that I was totally oblivious of. So how do we address blind spots? I gave many different scenarios. So starting out with love and compassion, those 3 questions that I just gave you, that is, if you can keep those in mind, it helps us determine whether or not and how to address the blind spots. Environment is everything. If I'm going to point out your blind spot in front of a group, and that's why we're there, it's a safe environment where we're working together as a team. Everybody knows it's safe, and everybody knows we have blind spots. I might point out some of my own. And so I'm in the same field that you are. I'll put myself on the same level. And then we'll talk about your blind spot. We'll help you overcome it. You feel empowered at the end of that. You feel like you can take the world on. This was exciting. You've discovered something that you can overcome. And you'll be a little bit closer to being that highly successful person that you've always wanted to be. But far too many of us are holding on to our blind spots, and we're grabbing that thing like it was the dearest thing in the world. We don't want to let go of it. And I barely want to get in the presence of this man that has the ability to recognize it rather quickly, because he might point it out. And I'm going to put my guard up so he doesn't. I'm going to kind of hide and slink down so he doesn't see me and he doesn't point me out. You know, that in itself is a blind spot when we do those things, and we all do them at times. That's a blind spot in itself. I challenge every person as you're listening to this and determining how you're going to address people in their blind spots moving forward, and how you're going to do it with love and compassion using those 3 questions. How are you going to support them? I'm going to ask you to be open to have yours pointed out. When they're pointed out, you find yourself getting defensive. It's okay. Just get over it and recognize what happened, and then lower your bar, lower the defenses, lower the wall, and go ahead and receive that with as much grace as you can and make the necessary adjustments. The next time you go to point out a blind spot for someone, you will do it a little bit differently than if you haven't received your own blind spot being pointed out. So for every person on here, if you want to get good at helping people and pointing out their blind spots and helping them see them, which is very important as a coach and more important as a facilitator, then first be willing to have your own pointed out. And that's a tough one to do. Be willing to have that done. When you do, it helps you. It's been my experience. My blind spots have helped me a lot, having those pointed out. And I've had them pointed out many times, sometimes in a subtle way, sometimes in just simply awareness, sometimes in people just walking up and telling me, hey, listen, this is not really working out. And they will point out something that I didn't realize was a blind spot. But being able to receive one's own blind spots being pointed out is a huge step towards getting good at pointing out other people's blind spots. I know it works both ways, but it's a powerful concept. When we can have those pointed out, we can go down the road with much less possibilities of running over someone or hurting someone or crushing someone or damaging yourself in the process. The possibilities of that is much less. I know we have some truck drivers on this call that would fully understand what I was talking about when I was referring to blind spots in the rear view mirror or the side mirrors, whatever. But with that being said, guys, thank you all for joining us. And Kim, thank you so much for the question. The difference is how we do it, when we do it, why we do it, and are we allowing people to do that for us? Lastly, I would like to say it is very similar to disagreeing or disrespecting. I might disagree with someone, but I choose not to disrespect them. I might disagree with you, but I will respectfully discuss my disagreement, because if we can respectfully discuss a disagreement, we can come up with something that's much more powerful. But if I disagree with you or disrespect you, not necessarily just disagree, but disrespect you because I disagree, that's when it leaves long-lasting consequences. And I have that happen a lot, where people are just in their own junk, their own garbage, their own baggage that they haven't let go of yet. And then they want to disagree with me, but they don't want to disagree. They actually want to disrespect me to kind of get even for their own pain that they feel. I don't go too well with that. I'll let it go once or twice, and that's about as far as that's going to go. So be very mindful that when you disagree with someone, it's okay to disagree. Don't disrespect. Same thing with this. When we're pointing out blind spots, we do it respectfully, and we do it in a way because we know that if they hold on to that, they're going to hurt someone. They're going to hurt us. They're going to hurt themselves. Someone's going to get hurt out of the deal. And we ourselves are looking forward to having our own blind spots pointed out. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Make it a great day. And as always, remember, don't settle for less than who you are. Kim, thank you so much. We'll see you guys in the field today. God bless.